Previously, a bedridden man was suddenly transmigrated to another world, where he gains the new identity of Levis, the soul harvester. In this world, Levis must claim the lives of others to extend his own, a haunting paradox that he must come to terms with. He travels from one battlefield to another. One day, his mercenary group leader betrayed and killed all his comrades. So he killed him. But due to the immense debt that was forced on him, he had no choice but to live in the forest and become a beast hunter. In that place, he met a powerful beast hunter, Guilford. Then one day, the mercenary leader's son Marco invaded the forest with an army. At the same time, the monster in the forest started going wild and rampaged. Marco was selfish, he cut down his own comrade to accomplish his goals. After seeing that, Levis finally figured out what to do. His job was to kill bastards like him. Levis cut off his arm. Marco was astonished and called him a bastard. Levis had 940 hours of lifespan left. He called Marco trash and used 60 hours to increase his power. Levis told him to not think that it was unfair and that his life would be worth using. He stabbed him with his sword. But Marco was a tough bastard, he didn't die. As he was about to finish him, a humongous beast emerged from the forest. It was as big as a mountain. Levis was shocked to see such an unrealistically big monster. Guilford said it was the owner of the mountain, the red bear. He was confused because it shouldn't leave the rocky mountain. At that moment, a monster arm hit Levis out of nowhere. When he saw what actually hit him, he was baffled. It was Marco with the arm of a stone monkey attached to his body. Marco was drinking a potion. He said, and I quote, "How dare a mere random mercenary call me trash?" Then he recalled the past. Even when he was seriously injured, his father would always call him trash. Even when he joined the noble's army, his seniors called him trash. So he killed his seniors to prove his strength. His stupid act impressed the noble. So he became the leader of all the knights under the noble. The noble informed him that his father died and his killer was probably the only survivor from the mercenary group, the soul harvester Levis. The noble asked him why he didn't look sad even when he heard that his father died. Marco said that his father would always say that people would die as trash if they weren't strong. And based on what he said, it would seem he died because he was trash. Then the noble looked at the black forest and said that the huge rock in the center symbolized the monsters coming out of the black forest. The material from a monster hunt fetches a handsome amount. Recently he spent a fortune on the battlefield. So he needed an income. But there were rogues living in the forest. Marco quickly understood that all he needed to do was to kill them all. The noble said he was easy to talk to and gave him a potion. Marco asked what it was. The noble said it was nothing great. But if he were to face a strong opponent it would be a huge help. The potion gave Marco the power of monsters. Marco punched him with the stone monkey's arm and Levis blocked it with his sword. But Marco was much stronger than before. He asked Levis where his bravery went to. Because all Levis could do was block his attacks. He got pushed back and Marco jumped in the air. Marco combined his ether with the stone monkey's arm. He told Levis to die and the collision was devastating. But he was startled. Guilford intervened and said that they were in a hurry. He defeated Marco with one punch. Levis said that he was thankful, but he could have handled it himself. Then Guilford told him that there was no need for him to fight. Guilford launched a surprise attack and knocked him out. As the humongous red bear approached, Guilford said that it wasn't something a beast hunter could handle. The noble's army retreated, and Fennel the cook carried the unconscious Levis out of the forest. Guilford gathered his men to fight the red bear. Because if it got out of the mountain a horrible disaster was going to happen. Guilford was prepared to die even if it only bought time for the citizens to escape. Half a century ago, the god of the demon kind, Chaos, and his army came to invade the continents. Everyone on the continent joined forces against him. And had a war that would be called the Holy War in the far future. To avert the invasion, different kinds of species gathered and eventually won the war. However, in the aftermath of the Holy War, most of the races other than humans became extinct. And soon after unidentified demonic beasts started to show up all over the continent. The protagonist of the Holy War, Emperor Troyson, ordered the nobles to share the responsibility for the problems caused by the demonic beasts. And numerous knights volunteered to manage the places where beasts show up. No, they were forced. Then Guilford, the captain of the Holy Knights, asked the emperor why the young knights were being sacrificed even though he said the nobles should be responsible. The emperor didn't even answer Guilford's question. Then the high priest said, and I quote, "How dare you talk back to the emperor? Guilford, Do you want to do this mission instead? Even then the Emperor stayed silent. After that, Guilford started staying in that forest as a beast hunter. He had no regrets. He and his comrades were determined to take down the demonic beasts even if they died there. The number of beasts was endless. As Guilford continued to take down one beast after another, he noticed a sinister energy coming from the red bear. All the other beasts had that scent on them. He realized the root cause of the beast's outbreak was the humongous red bear. He pushed through the beasts with his overwhelming power. He ripped them apart with his fists and approached the red bear. He gathered his ether in his fist and punched its chest. It caused an explosion and revealed a giant red crystal. As Guilford was about to break it, the crystal made an explosion. At the same time, Fennel the cook heard the explosion. He was worried about Guilford. Then Levis started to wake up. He called Fennel a bastard and asked where he was taking him. Fennel said that they didn't have much time and explained that the giant demonic beast was called the Red Bear. It harnesses ether in a magic stone embedded in its chest. Because of its enormous size, it was called a disaster. And that's why Guilford told him that they couldn't get Levis into trouble and asked him to get him out of the forest. Levis said that if it was that dangerous he should fight too. He was going to tell him that if he killed just a few more demonic beasts he could help. But Fennel didn't listen. He desperately told Levis to just evacuate the citizens out of the forest and be in charge of warning the Empire. Then suddenly, Fennel's body was cut in half. Levis was shocked. It was Marco's doing. His monster transformation went even further. He provoked Levis saying he should have seen his face. If it wasn't for the cook, he could have punctured him. Then he said that dying like trash was the destiny of the weak ones. The lives of the weak only exist for the strong ones. Fennel fell on Levis's arms. As he was dying, he told Levis to run and save himself. Levis asked Marco if he said that the lives of the weak ones exist for the strong. He took out his knife and said that Marco was right. Levis put Fennel out of his misery and said to himself that his life would be worth it. Marco laughed at the sight of Levis killing his comrade. He said that Levis should be worried about himself instead of bringing peace to his allies. Then Levis told him he would clarify just two things. First, he didn't do that just for Fennel. Second, he doesn't have to worry about himself, because Marco wasn't his match. Marco couldn't understand what that power was. He got split in half. Levis told him to not be too sad, because his life would be far more worth using. Levis exchanged his accumulated lifespan to use the god of war Ram's broadsword. Since his head was cracked open, Marco died for real. The amount of time Levis got for killing him was equivalent to killing a ton of stone monkeys. Levis wondered how a human could obtain the power of monsters. But that wasn't important at the moment. Taking care of the giant monster was the bigger priority. Levis used that skill at the cost of Fennel's life, so he couldn't stop there. He rushed toward the Red Bear. Guilford reacted fast, so he survived the explosion. But the Red Bear had already regenerated. Guilford told his comrades to attack together. They listened to his command and attacked. But the monster's body started changing. Snake-like tentacles and spikes killed all the hunters that approached. Guilford was shocked. He realized that it wasn't a mere demonic beast anymore. He witnessed a similar phenomenon in the last Holy War. The weird energy coming out of the crystal in its chest was the cause of that abnormal phenomenon. He knew they couldn't win if they didn't break it. Guilford charged at the monster. The man-eating tentacles injured him, but that wasn't enough to stop him. Guilford used his ether to blast straight through the tentacles right into the heart of the beast. He knew that wasting more time would just increase casualties. So he gathered all his ether into his fist and tried to finish it in one blow. He punched the crystal. But to his surprise, the crystal was unscathed. The situation was bad. The bear was already regenerating. He couldn't afford to back down. So he held on with his bare body. He desperately hit the crystal with his head. He hit again and again. He prayed for it to break and hit it some more. But the crystal showed no sign of breaking. Guilford wasn't afraid of death, but if they lost there, then a lot more people would die. At that moment, Levis showed up. He said that place was easy to find, thanks to all the noise Guilford was making. Guilford was alarmed. He asked what Levis was doing there. Levis told him to hold tight because he would blow all of it at once. He prepared the broadsword, and the system notified him that 12 hours of his lifespan would be used every second of its use. Guilford was astonished, because the power he used wasn't ether. It was the power of the war god, Ram. Levis used that power to slice the crystal in half. But the power of that sword was so great it cut the huge monster in half, and the force from it also made a huge explosion. Guilford's men were surprised to see the deformed demonic beast's body break. They figured that Guilford had won. After that, Levis had something he was curious about. If he didn't arrive, Guilford would have died, so he didn't understand why he did such a reckless thing. He could have just left and let the noble handle it. Guilford replied that a beast hunter's job was to hunt demonic beasts. Why would he let someone else kill such a huge demonic beast? Levis was content with that answer. Then Guilford asked him why he came back, even though he told him that it had nothing to do with him. So Levis gave the same answer and said he wouldn't let someone else kill such a huge demonic beast. Also, he couldn't ignore it as a beast hunter. Hearing that, Guilford burst out in laughter. He called him a lousy beast hunter for not even leaving any materials behind. So Levis asked Guilford to teach him so such a thing doesn't happen. Guilford agreed and said he would teach him really well starting tomorrow. Then suddenly, Levis fell to the ground. Levis was drained from using the War God's buff. But the more important issue was the notification message that he was seeing. It said he could no longer use Ram's blessing. A week later, a blonde man and a redhead woman came to the Black Forest. The blonde man was lazy and kept complaining. The redhead woman said that the seal in the Black Forest should be shaped like a rock mountain. Then the blonde man said if it breaks, the mana inside the seal will pollute everything around it. Nothing will be able to grow there and it'll become a land of the dead. Also, it would smell really bad. Just thinking about it made him want to vomit. The redhead told him that he wouldn't have to vomit because it was already over. The blonde man was confused because if that were the case, then how were the surroundings so normal? Seeing the calm state of the forest, he said, and I quote, "Things have gotten real interesting." At the same time, Levis was hunting beasts in the forest. He searched all day but only found one. Due to the recent turmoil, the number of beasts in the forest decreased. Then Guilford came to find him. He called Levis a lousy apprentice and said he didn't have enough passion. Levis asked him why he looked so happy if he were that angry. Since he couldn't use the power of Ram anymore, he wanted to get used to using ether in battle. The monster attack was taken care of, but it was only possible thanks to a lot of sacrifices. They buried their dead comrades with simple eulogies. They also buried the nobles' knights right beside them. Fennel was also buried there. He wished for Fennel to learn to cook properly in his next life. Then Guilford started training him. As he hit him, he told Levis to cover his body with ether and focus it on the place where he would get hit. Levis was having a hard time following his continuous barrage of attacks. Then Guilford asked him one more time about how he was able to use the power of God. That day who he saw hunting the giant monster was definitely Ram, the god of war. Levis told him he saw wrong and Guilford attacked his blind spot. Guilford told him to forget it. If he didn't want to tell him, he must have a reason. Levis was wondering how he was supposed to tell him that he got reincarnated and used a game novel-like system window. Then it was time to train the second disciple. It was the girl that Levis saved. Her name was Belle. Guilford said he made a mistake by taking her in as a disciple, but he was sure she had enough talent to be a knight. As Levis was leaving, she bowed and complimented him. Levis was annoyed because she was even copying the color of his arm bandages. She enthusiastically said that she respected him. As they were training, she was impatient to use a sword. But Guilford told her that not anyone can be a knight and that she should start from the basics. Seeing that reminded Levis of the past. At that moment, the blonde man and the redhead showed up. Guilford was not pleased to see them. He told Levis that they were their main business partners. Levis didn't think they were merchants. He couldn't see any weapon on them. He was curious as to how they came into the Black Forest without any weapons or escorts. Guilford asked them the reason for their visit. Then the blonde man asked him if there was anyone there who could use the power of God. Guilford with a nervous face asked him why. But seeing his reaction, the blonde man was sure that there was someone who could use it. With a flick of a finger, he restrained them with his restraining magic. Seeing his strength, Levis was sure that the man in front of them was a great magician. The blonde man apologized for being rough, and Guilford called him a bastard. The blonde man explained that the rock that gave them trouble was called a sealing rock. That sealing rock can only be destroyed with the power of a god, and someone broke that recently. So they only came there to check if that power was that of an evil god or not. If that god didn't belong to the human religion, then they would have to take care of it right away. Hearing that, Guilford accused them of knowing way too much about that incident as if it happened before too. The blonde man said that it happened several times before. Guilford asked him why he didn't tell them. Then the blond man said, and I quote, "If we knew that it could only be destroyed with the power of a god, there wouldn't be so many sacrifices. We could have prevented this from happening from the beginning. Yes, I knew you would think that way. That's why we didn't tell you." Then while laughing Guilford said if that were to happen they would lose suppliers of monster remains. The blond man said he was right. There weren't many places that could keep providing them with monster materials continuously. Then he said that it was good for them too, since he got to keep his job. At that moment, the enraged Guilford punched him. But his attack was stopped. The redhead blocked Guilford's attack. She called the blond man Tezhua, and said that was the reason why she told him to think before he spoke. Levis was shocked because she blocked it with a sword made from ether. Guilford immediately knew who she was because there was only one sword clan that used that technique on the continent. The laziest sword, unmoving Chili's sword clan. The redhead said that they should call her the Emperor's third sword. She was uncomfortable with the nickname Lazy Sword. Hearing that, Guilford laughed. He charged at her and said he would like to see what his junior was capable of. There were 8 sword clans on the continent. Among those, 3 were trusted by the Emperor and had been given a status. First sword, sharpest sword, Croyd of Thunder. Second sword, heaviest sword, chief man of fog. And the third, that can create weapons by condensing ether, but has limited movements as a result, the laziest sword. The weapon she attacked Guilford with, he broke them easily, and said that he would break however many weapons she creates. Eventually, there must be a limit. But she summoned tens of weapons at the same time, and crushed him in a flash. She said to Guilford that it was clever of him to aim for the ankle of the weapons, but their sword clan had made progress. While he stayed in the forest, swordsmanship kept evolving. Then she asked him who used the power of God. He told her that he wouldn't have fought her if he was planning to talk. Hearing that, she said that she didn't have any other choice. She didn't like resorting to violence, but she would have to cut off one of his arms. At that moment, Levis confessed that he was the one who used the power of God and they should let Guilford go. Guilford called him an idiot and said that if he stayed quiet it could have ended with one arm. Tezhua, the blond man, said they should do a fact check. He lifted Levis into the air. Levis asked what he was doing. Tezhua told him it was just simple magic. He used it to inspect his body. Regardless of what type of energy it may be, it always leaves a trace. As the mana flowed into him, he felt incredibly disgusted. He couldn't believe mages had to live with that. After that, all Tezhua could say was, "Amazing." He immediately released the restraining magic. And he called the redhead, Jean. He said to her to let them go. Jean apologized for their rudeness. Then Tezhua asked Levis for a private meeting. Levis told him to just say it there. Then Tezhua whispered into his ears, and I quote, "That won't do. If I'm right, you are from another world." Tezhua explained that the sealing stone was made after the holy war with the power of God to stop the mana left by the demons. Such sealing stones were hidden in different places on the continent. And one of them was hidden deep inside the mountain rock in the Black Forest. But somehow the seal was broken and the sealing stone disappeared without a trace. And abnormal phenomena started happening simultaneously. Levis asked him if he wanted to give him a history lesson. Tezhua said he only wanted to explain that they needed the power of God to break the sealing stone safely. But there was a problem. Levis was a knight who could use ether as well as the power of God. Levis asked if there was anything wrong with that. Tezhua said that it was very wrong. Normally the power of God cannot coexist with ether. Which was why most people didn't know that the power of God was controlled in a similar way to ether. Thinking back on it, Levis realized that every time he used his lifespan, there was a message saying all the ether had been converted into divine power. Most of his enemies couldn't understand the power he used. Just like Tezhua said, only a few people knew about his power. But the bigger question was, how he knew that he was from another world. Then Tezhua turned back and asked him to pray once. He said he wasn't doubting him, he just wanted to see if he was still connected with God. Then Levis asked if praying would connect him with God. Tezhua was baffled. He said that the more they talked the more interesting it got. He was confused as to how he was talking to God if it wasn't prayers. Levis told him that he only got a message that his deal with the god of war had ended. Hearing that, Tezhua told him that deals were done between equals. It was his first time meeting someone who had made a deal with a god. Levis was getting annoyed at how clever that bastard was. Then Tezhua told him that the more they talked the more questions he had. He requested Levis to pray. If he wished really hard and called for God, he would respond. Levis prayed, and I quote, "Bastard who wants to consume my life, come out right now." Suddenly he found himself in outer space. A giant being appeared before him. It said, and I quote, "Mortal, your prayer has reached me. God of abundance and life. I, Marcella, have responded to your call." Levis was confused. He told her that he called for Ram. Goddess Marcella told him that Ram won't respond to him. Because after he arrived, he didn't listen to their request and acted on his own. And treated the deal they blessed him with, as something he owned. Levis was even more confused. He asked what request they were talking about. Marcella told him that she also came to blame him for his laziness. But after taking a look, she realized that he came to that world in an unstable state. He was supposed to be punished, but she decided to help him a little. She started fixing the unstable system. She restored the store function, the stat function, and the quests. The restored system displayed that the main quest reward was the deletion of the limited life system. Levis was taken aback. And that is all for now. Sadly, we have caught up to the latest chapters of this manhwa. I will make a part 3 video as soon as more chapters become available. So if you don't want to miss that, subscribe and hit the bell icon for notifications.